Michael Killen. I like having discussions with people who have good minds. I've invited Burt Richter. He is a Nobel laureate. He is the former director of SLAC, and he's written an interesting book called Beyond Smoke and Mirrors, Climate Change and Energy in the 21st Century. I'm intrigued by a title, Beyond Smoke and Mirrors. I want to find out from Burt what he's talking about. And also, I have invited the author of A Cubic Mile of Oil, MALHOTRA, to ask and make a comment or two after you and I finish our discussion.
Good. I have his book on my bookshelves.
Good.
The other energy book.
Burt, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you for coming here.
A pleasure.
Beyond Smoke and Mirrors. This is a mystery story or something?
Well, you can take it two ways. How are we going to move beyond coal-fired power plants, the smoke, or solar, the mirrors? That you can take it that way. Or you can take it at, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors being put up to mask the real story of what you've got to do to move the entire energy system of the world. There are some people who pretend we're going to snap our fingers and windmills are going to spring up all over the place, solar cells all over the place, and everything will be fine.
Okay. Now, I heard something. You said behind smoke and mirrors, and you mentioned coal, and then you mentioned solar, which makes me suspicious that you're putting those two in some sort of special category and maybe possibly not a good one.
Well, I thought the smoke and mirrors, I always intended it to be the obfuscation that is going up on the stories about what you can do with renewables today or tomorrow, which are just plain, absolute nonsense. I wrote the book to sort of tell people what we know about the climate and the changing climate, how we know it, what we need to do about it, what we can do about it, how you could do it, and then what kind of international agreements or local legislation are the most effective ways to move the system from fossil fuels and ever-rising temperatures to something which is not dependent on fossil fuels, where the temperature wouldn't go up so much.
I went through your book, okay, and yes, you did cover the full scope of all the things you just spoke about. I'd like to do one question about the climate. Big deal that climate is changing. For millions of years it's been changing. It's been getting hotter, colder.
Sure.
Why should we be concerned? We can all, even the deniers, you know, what's the big difference?
It's very simple. There's 7 billion people now. There are going to be more than 10 billion people in 2100. If this was all happening 10 or 20,000 years ago, there might have been 10 million. And then everybody could move. But how are you going to move 10 billion people? What are you going to do when the regions, the temperate zones, move north and get smaller and agriculture is hotter? This is a big problem because it's happening fast and there are too many people to move to follow what happened during the ice ages. We've had lots of them, but they all happened when there were a much smaller number of people.
I just want to not enrich, but make the point. I read that in your book, and I found it important because I've listened to deniers and I've thought about the change. You made the point. It's changed in the past, but it changed over a long period of time, and now it's changing very quickly. And now there's 9 billion people on the Earth. There wasn't that many a long, long time ago.
Right.
And we now have to be concerned with what can possibly happen.
Yes.
And now, you have said, and in this book, that solar is fine, wind is fine, hydro is fine, biomass is all fine. But when you put it all together, and I think, and you correct me, and you take a look at the the emerging, growing needs of the energy population of the developed nations and the underdeveloped nations, etc. And us, all this solar, all that stuff can't scale up to meet the growing needs. Am I misinterpreting what you said?
What I said is that they cannot meet the Earth's demands. They're too variable, and there are lots of studies that tried to solve the problem with just California's renewables. California's renewables don't even include big hydro. They're just solar, wind, geothermal, ocean systems, which don't work, and small hydro, and there's not much of them. So you talk about getting all that stuff here, and I was part of a big study done by the California Council on Science and Technology. Could you make the 2050 goal with only the renewables? And the answer was no. And the reason the answer is no is there's no way to store the energy from a very variable source like wind. And so if you don't want blackouts, you've got to turn on natural gas-fired power plants, and they emit greenhouse gases. So there's technology missing. If you don't care about how much money you spend on energy, you will put huge wind farms on the West Coast. You'll put huge wind farms on the Great Plains and the Great Lakes and the East Coast. Those are the good wind places in the United States. And then you'll connect them with very expensive big transmission lines, and then you'll hope that I can avoid blackouts. Okay. So when the wind stops blowing here, it's still blowing in the Great Plains, and I can get my energy.
So am I hearing you? If we spend, let's say just the United States, billions and billions of dollars on solar, wind, etc., the so-called renewables, we may meet our energy requirements, but billions of extra dollars, is that
I did not say that. I said you may meet them, but you're not going to meet your greenhouse gas goals.
Is this because?
Because you've got to back up these variable things, and the only thing you've got to back them up now, there is no big energy storage stuff, is natural gas power plants, which can be turned on and off and ramped up and down fast.
And they emit greenhouse gases.
And they emit greenhouse gases. And, so there was a study done by the California Council of Science and Technology. It was released in 2010. It was commissioned by all the state agencies. And it says you can't meet the 2050 goals with the renewables alone as California defines them. Okay. Not even big hydro. I can look at other states, and the other states have much more sensible programs. Okay. Ours is not sensible.
We're going to go to nuclear in a moment, but I just want to say, you mentioned, I think, green and renewable. Nuclear isn't under green, is it?
Nuclear is zero emission, so you should talk about clean. Big hydro is zero emission. Yeah. New York already meets California's 2030 goals. It has more than 50% of zero emission stuff. And what is it? It's 30% big hydro and it's 20% nuclear. Okay. Neither qualifies here. So,
all right. So a solution is nuclear. But in California, you could have your head chopped off if you want to push too much with the nuclear. But I have a big national question. You once told me, I think it's 144 nuclear plants in the United States.
104, there were.
104. And there is pressure, for example, to shut down all of them in California. And I'm under the impression from what maybe you told me, somebody else, is it could be 20 years before a next generation of nuclear power plants can come into use. So what do you do with the ones, what do you recommend we do with the ones we have now?
Well, what I said it would take the 20 years for is for new fuel cycles to come into use. The small modular reactors people are talking about are the same technology of the present reactors. They're smaller, they're cheaper per unit power, and they can be made walk-away safe. That is, if you get a problem, you can just suck your thumb for 2 weeks and nothing will happen to them. The new fuel cycles, they're going to require a lot more development. Small modular, I expect the first one to be running in the first half of the 2020s.
So, okay, I notice you're on George Shultz's team to put together a series of recommendations for the next president, okay? Is that correct?
I am working with an economist on something called the revenue neutral carbon tax.
Okay,
So,
and since I see you're under this umbrella, you're in the Hoover Institute as listed as part of the team. I have a question. When George, and if you're with him or not with him, when George Shultz presents to the next president recommendations for the next national energy plan, what's going to happen if Donald Trump, and this is my last question, if Donald Trump is president?
don't have the faintest idea.
You could do too.
No. You asked me a question, now let me give you an answer. The reason I don't have the faintest idea is if you look right now, take a snapshot, then you'll find that it's the Republicans who are well in favor of nuclear, and it's the Greens and the Democrats that oppose nuclear. So it is not clear to me what is going to happen.
You didn't answer my question. What happens if Trump is there?
I'm telling you, I don't
Okay.
know.
All right.
Trump changed, and he's very variable. Now he's suddenly a denier.
Okay.
A year ago, Trump wasn't a denier. Today he is. The Democratic platform says we got to do it all with renewables and we shouldn't have a carbon tax. I think both the parties are full of it,
All right.
and I
I'm
won't
gonna,
say what
I'm
it
going to
is.
stop you. By the way, there's a million books out on the climate and energy. I found this one very interesting. I really did. And Bert is a very clear thinker, and it's very helpful. I recommend you get it. Smoke and Mirrors, Climate Change and Energy in the 21st.
Beyond smoke and mirrors.
Beyond smoke. I want to thank you very much. You've been a great guest. I always enjoy you. Ripu, what's the most important statement you think Bert Richter said?
I think his point that it's not going to be a snap of fingers and you suddenly get all the solar and things working, which is something I keep hearing again and again. I know he wrote his book back in 2010, about the same year that we wrote our book, and the cubic mile of oil, and we had the same thing, that these things take a lot longer time frame. That was one very, very important message, that you cannot do it just with these things. We don't have all the right technologies, don't have enough of storage.
Thank you. Jim Sweeney,
Hello, Michael.
always a pleasure to see you. And I remember a couple of months ago, you told me you were coming out with this new book, and you said it's energy efficiency, and you said it's building a clear, clean, and secure economy. And I said to you, why didn't you name it something else? I shouldn't even say that. But now after I have looked at this book, I have a good sense as to why it is building a clean, secure economy. I don't even see the word environment in there, but I do see. So, would you care to tell me, well, first of all, let me just put you into perspective. You are the producer of the Silicon Valley Energy Summit. It is such a good summit. I've been there for 7 years in a row, even though you count 6. And you're also the head of the Precourt Energy Efficiency Center at Stanford. And you are a senior fellow at the Hoover Institute. And I know you're
All correct.
What is the most important quality you offer in this book?
I think the book is telling a story about things that are in front of our eyes. We all know about energy efficiency in the small. We know about if you put in a light-emitting diode lamp, it's going to use a lot less energy than fluorescent, than even fluorescent lights, and much more than incandescent lights. We know that fuel cars use less gasoline than they used to in the past. We all see that in the small. What I wanted to bring to light is energy efficiency in the big, and that's what the title's about. Clean energy efficiency has been the dominant factor in decarbonizing the U.S. economy. Carbon per dollar of GDP is down 61% from the time of the crisis. 58% is energy intensity. We're using less energy per unit of economy. 3% is all of these other things, wind and solar and fracking.
All right, can I paraphrase you for a minute?
Sure.
Your starting point for almost everything in this book is 1973 with the oil embargo, right? And that is the point we started to think about our energy needs, maybe cost, and others. And I think you just said, since then, the greatest contributor to reducing carbon emissions and maybe the need for oil and money maybe is energy efficiency. Something like that? Is that where you...
Absolutely, and that's why there's a clean in this. Secure economy is, this energy efficiency is the dominant reason why we're going to become a net exporter of oil, of energy, and that's the security that we've gotten from energy efficiency.
Okay,
so it's clean and secure.
So the secure, what you're referring to, is not having to buy it and be dependent upon outside. But
Yes.
isn't secure also taking costs out of our economy, which makes this country even more secure?
And that's why I have building a clean, secure economy, because the economy is, energy efficiency has been profitable for companies. It's reduced the cost of energy for low-income people as well as middle-income and people. So it's been good for our economy, it's good for the environment, and good for security.
Okay, now I want to say, and I'm sure you know this, there are a lot of cities, counties, governments around the world, or just in this country, and every city has a sustainability planner. Every corporation has the same, and most of them, I think NASA has about 9 facilities, and they have a executive working there. The whole world now has these experts, and they're all trying to find a way to reduce energy cost, reduce emissions, and maybe to become more secure. I want to tell you, I thought about them when I went through your book. You have the numbers, you have the models, you have the logic and the insight that everyone that has to plan and advise their city, their country, their state on how to reduce emissions, reduce costs, and reduce the use of all types of energy. Am I correct?
You're correct, but more than that, I view that the functioning of all of these cities, the functioning of corporations, the functioning of non-governmental organizations, of the government activities, and the price system working together have all been sort of on the same team and have ultimately reduced just dramatically the intensity of energy use in the economy. So you're absolutely right. Only most of the cities are inventing new things that I never would have guessed. And it's the invention process that's been going on throughout the economy that's led to energy efficiency progress that very few people would have anticipated, and I didn't anticipate many of the things that have happened, which is extrapolating to the future. I don't think I could anticipate many of the creative innovations that are going to occur by just those same institutions moving forward if we let them.
Good. Now I'm going to ask a hard question. And I saw your definition. What is the definition of energy efficiency?
I think it as economically efficient reductions of energy use. Think about it this way. We reduce the use of energy in a way that the benefits of reducing it exceed the cost. It's the opposite of freezing in the dark. This is not freezing in the dark. This is using less energy to get all the same things that you want, the good things of life, in a way that the benefits of the reduction are greater than the cost of doing the reduction.
Now, that is a big definition.
It's a big definition.
And I've thought about it, and I find it has a problem. I'm just that
That's
the,
okay.
Not yours. I'm not. I mean, just to define energy is. I mean, you can't see it. It's and efficiency. You wind up using the same terms, and I have accused you once of calling me, saying I'm like Don Quixote, a man
Yes.
who's somewhat crazy.
And you did a painting
Yeah,
after
phew.
I told you that.
And I want to say, you hurt my feelings. Like you put this image for energy efficiency on your, and you didn't come to me. Now, how does this sound? And we're almost finished, okay? What about thinking in terms, this is for imagery, and I'm making, okay, think of an orange squeezer. You know, you squeeze oranges and then put solar panels in it, put some coal, put a can of oil, put some uranium, and have a squeezer, and it comes down, and maybe it's a gigantic foot coming out of Congress or coming out of corporations, and out of one end, there's a pipe comes dollars, because you're squeezing the dollars out of the use. Another pipe comes out, and it goes to a valve that's turning off energy. And you have another valve that is capturing carbon emissions. No?
That would be wonderful, but I'm not sure I could have fit that in the cover here.
Okay, so we're moving along, and I want to say, I asked you, who asked you to make this book? I remember who you told me, George Shultz.
George Shultz. This is the second book that George Shultz said, Jim, you've got to write a book about what you're talking about. And I wrote the book because I didn't want to disappoint George. He wanted me to do it.
Okay, now he's working, I believe, on presenting a plan to the next president for what the new policies will be for national energy, okay? And I think if he asked you to write a book on this topic, because you have pointed out energy efficiency is so important, he probably asked you because he wants to get the good, hard data for part of his project. You can argue with it. But I was wondering, what happens if Donald Trump becomes the president and George Shultz gives his most important, maybe the last big contribution to this country, and he gives it to Donald Trump? What happens?
Am I allowed to move to a parallel universe?
I would appreciate you if you would not like the great
Look at
Burt Richter, who dodged the question.
Well, I'm not dodging the question. I agree with Burt. I have no clue what Donald Trump would do in this area. Hopefully he would get really good advisors who would tell him some truth, but I have no clue what he would do.
I'll let you go on that. Two things. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a great book. I really like it. I learned a lot, and if I was a planner, it's got the numbers, the models, everything I would need to do my job. It's a good book. And I want to say two things. I think if George Shultz gives his plan to Donald Trump, it goes in the waste paper basket, okay? I make one quick announcement. My next speech is going to be at the Art Mix in Mendocino, August the 2nd, August the 4th to August 28th. The Art Mix, I'll be up there, and I'm going to be talking about angels of the climate, the oceans, and life. That will be my next painting. And when I plan to interpret and forecast in the painting is what I think George Shultz is going to recommend to the next president. Oh, would you be kind, Ripu? I know I'm high today. What's the most important thing Jim Sweeney said?
Well, he certainly pointed out that if we were to be doing things like we did in the 1970s, we would have emissions that would be up the wazoo. You know, we get 36 billion tons of carbon dioxide today. I think we would be, by those standards, we would be 150 billion tons maybe or something. So completely outrageous. But efficiencies have allowed us to be able to do more while using less. Now, while using less, reducing the total amount. It's not like we are using less energy. That's not something he said. But I'm afraid that that's a message that many people get, that we can do with less energy. No, we're not doing that with less energy. We are getting a whole lot of the bang for the buck. More bucks for our bang is what it is, however the way expression goes. In this case, you want the bucks out, right? So we are getting the dollar values, a lot more dollar value out for the energy that we are using.
Okay, that's wonderful. So I just want to share who you are. You are an SRI fellow, SRI International, a major research company. And most people who don't know this, it was SRI that played a major role in bringing me to California, okay? And so you are an SRI fellow, expert in chemistry and energy. And this is your book, A Cubic Mile of Oil. And to put your book into context with Burt Richter's wonderful book and Jim Sweeney's wonderful book, you have taken a look, and two other men, at the numbers, the magnitude of the numbers and the incompatibility of the different ways of measuring things. And you and your group have come up with a model for simplifying, dealing with these different great quantities and different ways of measuring. Would that be correct?
Yes.
So,
Michael, as always, a great pleasure. Thank you.
well, it's the same here. And I want to thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim.
Go out and get these books, ladies and gentlemen. And I hope to see you I'm going to give a speech on the 27th in Mendocino at the Art Mix. And I hope you come on up. There's artists come out of the mountains, and God, do they produce some very interesting work. So I'm Michael Killen. My guest is Jim Sweeney. And my colleague here is RIPUDAMAN.